Just today, I accidentally hung up on someone while they were still talking because I thought we were done talking. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Neurodivergent. My name's Jen, and on this channel, I talk about being a female diagnosed with autism and ADHD. So if that's your kind of thing, I'm hoping you'll stick around. If not, you can stick around anyway. It's not like I can force you to leave. Now, many of you out there have probably taken online tests like the Autism Quotient before, either to confirm your suspicions or to point you in the right direction of pursuing a professional diagnosis. But funny enough, I was not in that group. I never took any of these online tests prior to my diagnosis. I went straight from my son's diagnosis to finding out autism is largely hereditary to researching, then to professional diagnosis. So since I missed out on doing one of these for myself, I thought it'd be fun to take one now with all of you, but for a slightly different reason. I want to see if also having ADHD will affect the test results enough that my test results will come back as non-autistic. Stay tuned to see the results. If you're an ADHDer like me, you can sometimes feel like you don't completely fit in with the ADHD people, but you also don't feel like you completely fit in with the autistic people either. And I think there's a certain amount of imposter syndrome that this can cause. Some of our traits of ADHD can compensate for autism and vice versa. However, these compensations don't mean we have less struggles. What it does mean is that we struggle with elements from two conditions and have traits we wouldn't have if we only had one or the other. So, in instances where a test is just assessing one condition alone, like this AQ test I'm about to take, it might seem like I'm less autistic because it's only capturing half the picture. So the AQ in this test stands for Autism Spectrum Quotient, and basically it only screens for autism alone, like we said. I predict that at best it'll probably result in me having a lower score, but it's entirely possible that it could cause me to score below the threshold for autism, but we're going to find out together. Now, this is a self-administered test, so you could take it online as well if you haven't done so already. But before we get into it, I want to disclose that this test was developed by Simon Baron-Cohen and his colleagues, and there is some controversy around Simon Baron-Cohen and the autism sphere that I'm not going to get into here, but I wanted to address that before we move on. With that said, this is still considered to be a valid test by most professionals. This isn't like one of those Facebook quizzes where you try to find out which Harry Potter character you are by telling it what your favorite type of beverage is. It has actual research backing it, and it was developed by a team at the Autism Research Center in Cambridge. It's not meant to diagnose you with anything, but it can be used as a tool to gauge if you're on the right track, or if it might be worth seeking a professional diagnosis in the first place. A score of 26 or higher is a greater indication that you might be autistic, while lower scores mean you may not be autistic. One last thing. I don't want this to be all about me. The goal here is for you to think about how you would answer these questions, and I'm hoping that you'll find yourself relating to some of my answers as well. Let's do this. The first question is, I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. Yeah, this is easily a no-brainer for me. Absolutely, definitely disagree. Definitely disagree. First of all, I don't like to be perceived, and I don't like people watching me do stuff. Like doing talk to text in front of someone is too much for me. But second, I don't like asking for help. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I need people to help me lift heavy objects, but if I could find a way to do it on my own, I totally would. Number 2, I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. That's another easy one. Yes, definitely agree. I do things the same way so consistently, it doesn't even occur to me that I could do it another way sometimes. Like, my brain won't even introduce the possibility that I could even make my salad with different ingredients. Or like when I first moved into this house, having to learn a whole new routine around how I place things in the dishwasher or how to do my laundry, making me feel really unbalanced and out of order for far too long. And this can be a bad trait to have in some areas because I've struggled to learn new ways of doing things that might be more efficient But on rare occasions that I do learn a new way of doing something that makes sense and it's an improvement on how I used to do things, it's a game changer that occupies space in my brain for forever. So, yeah, I definitely do things the same way over and over again. Now, with my ADHD, I can be spontaneous, but that's not an indication of how we execute processes on a daily basis. Number 3, if I try to imagine something, I find it very easy to create a picture in my head. I do not. Let's say I was reading a book that describes the way a room is laid out or what the characters look like. It just feels like this amorphous blurb in my mind. Like, I understand the story and what's happening, but picturing the scene and the surroundings is always tough for me. I kid you not, there was one time when I was reading a fictional novel that I actually looked up pictures of houses online to try to help me imagine the scene in some way, because it was frustrating that I couldn't immerse myself more into the story. It probably almost sounds like I'm making that up, but I'm not. I really did do that, and that was years before my diagnosis. I also have difficulty creating pictures in my mind when I daydream. Because I also have the ADHD, I sometimes struggle with falling asleep. So, one of the ways I found to help myself get to sleep is by imagining stories in my mind, which is kind of like a grown-up version of reading myself a bedtime story, I guess. Even then, it's hard for me to imagine faces or scenery in my mind. So, yeah, definitely disagree. All right, I frequently get so strongly absorbed in one thing that I lose sight of other things. Yep, definitely agree, 100%. When I'm immersed in editing videos or graphics for another project that I really want to get done, I will ignore everything else in the world. And this can be things like feeding my animals or my kid or myself, but hold off on calling social services or animal control, please. I do manage to feed my kid and my animals, but I forget when I'm strongly absorbed in something and my kid has to come and ask me for food. Then I have to hide a ragey frustration inside that is irritated and jarred by having to stop what I'm doing. I mean, I try not to let it manifest on the outside, but I definitely feel it on the inside. And it gives me a feeling of guilt because it's not that I always forget that I have other things to do. I actually usually know dang well that I've got other stuff to do, but it's like I'm a prisoner tied to whatever it is that I'm doing at the time by invisible shackles that just won't let me change direction. So, yeah, strongly agree on this one. All right, I often notice small sounds when others do not. So, not to do that autistic thing where I overcomplicate things, but to overcomplicate things. Initially, I would say my answer is yes, I do. But I have to be honest that a part of me wonders how much biology plays a role in that, because to be intellectually fair, there are differences in pitches and frequencies we can hear based on sex or age. So like I hear noises that my husband can't all the time. But is that because I'm more sensitive or because I'm younger and a woman? But at the same time, I do tend to hone in on noises around other people that aren't my husband as well. And I can say with a decent amount of confidence that small or seemingly insignificant noises for sure bother me much more than others. If they didn't bother me, I probably wouldn't hone in on them so much. So I think I'm gonna select definitely agree. All right, let's see what the next one says. I usually notice car number plates or similar strings of information. I think I'm gonna say definitely disagree with this. My husband notices license plates much more than I do, and he's not autistic, but I also realize that the purpose of this question is probably to gauge how much you notice strings of information, and they're just using this as an example. But even if I were to try to broaden that out to other examples, I don't think I do this. Now, I do notice patterns and designs in things like buildings or decorations. Like, I will literally stare at repeating geometric patterns on a throw pillow or on flooring, for example, but I don't think noticing geometric patterns is the same as noticing like numerical strings of information. And I feel like my ADHD causes me to be in way too many other thought processes or daydreaming to notice small stuff like license plate numbers. So I think definitely disagree is probably right. Number 7, other people frequently tell me that what I've said is impolite, even though I think it is polite. Okay, I know what they're screening for here. A lot of people on the spectrum have difficulty understanding social cues, so they might be blunt sometimes when telling someone something, which can come off as rude. A great example of this would probably be something like an autistic person being offered food and then them saying with a flat affect, I don't like that. Whereas a neurotypical might beat around the bush and tell little white lies like, oh gosh, those look so good and that smells really great, but maybe I'll try one later because I'm just a little full right now, but goodness, thank you so much for offering. Basically, the autistic person just told the stone cold truth without all the extra BS or softening the sharp edges, whereas the neurotypical danced around the truth in order to be polite. But social cues just isn't one of the areas I struggle in as badly as some, and that actually has been shown to be the case more often for those with the comorbidity of ADHD. Matter of fact, I did a whole video on this. Editing Jen, throw a graphic up on the screen to show the video I'm talking about. No, PDA will not comply. But it's me asking you, which is yourself. Yeah, and? Please? Fine. So if you haven't already watched that, I would highly suggest it. But in it, I talk about a study that showed that those with autism and ADHD appear to have less social deficits than those with just autism, because there's a noted way that ADHD can mask some traits of autism, especially in the social skills department. Basically, it's an entire video dedicated to the nuanced differences of social deficits in someone who has both autism and ADHD, because many of us do differ in this area. So sorry for the distraction, but I feel it's really important to mention that here because I have a feeling they're going to ask a lot of questions related to social deficits in this test. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and select definitely disagree to this one. Number 8, when I'm reading a story, I can easily imagine what the characters might look like. Negative, ghostwriter. I did not read ahead in this test, and I actually already answered this specific scenario at the question that asks if it's easy to create a picture in my mind if I try to imagine something. So ironically, I already specifically answered this question on accident, which is kind of funny and weird at the same time. Alrighty, next it asks, I am fascinated by dates. I am not. So nope. Strongly disagree. I feel like this falls into the noticing strings of information category, but let me tell you, with my ADHD brain, I'm lucky I remember my own birthday. Everyone else is a crapshoot. I struggle to remember days for historical events or important events for my own friends and family. So, giant F in this area. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Number 10, in a social group, I can easily keep track of several different people's conversations. My problem is I can hear everyone's different conversations, which may be a part of my ADHD side, but maybe this happens with autism too, due to sound sensitivity. So I don't know, but either way, it's distracting and annoying. And like sometimes it makes it hard to pay attention to what someone is telling me because I'm beginning to pay attention to other conversations going on. Or in some instances, it's been hard not to ditch the conversation I'm currently participating in to join the other one if it's more interesting, which I feel like might be an ADHD thing. I mean, can any human really multitask, especially on things like keeping track of different conversations? I don't know. Maybe I'd have to pick strongly disagree. Because even though I can hear them all, that doesn't mean I can evenly split my attention between all of them. But I don't feel like any human being can. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I answered that one good or if I really got the point of it, but moving on. All right. 11. I find social situations easy. I do not. I will say certain social situations are easier than others depending on the people and the activities, because some people drain my energy much less and at a slower rate than others. But that doesn't mean my energy isn't being drained. And if it's a structured activity like board games or Texas Hold'em, I tend to enjoy it more because I can focus more on the activity rather than the socializing. But even in those instances where it's a preferred activity and people that I feel less awkward around, it's still draining and difficult in a lot of ways. So I think I'm going to choose strongly disagree here. since that ultimately is still the case, even in preferred activities with less draining people. All right, moving on to number 12. I tend to notice details that others do not. Yes, strongly agree. Only problem is 99% of the details I pick up on are usually irrelevant to the bigger picture because of my bottom-up thinking that makes it seem like I actually do not pick up on details. So, like, if I were to try to give an example of what I mean by this, let's say I was on the phone talking to someone about plans for an event. And yes, believe it or not, those things do happen because we all have those event obligations in life, right? And sometimes we have to get on the phone to discuss things. Anyway, I might pick up on things like specific word choices they use, what time of the day they called, where I was standing at certain points in the conversation, the back and forth chain of suggested food items, and in what order they were suggested in, and so on. But because my brain is paying so much attention to these irrelevant details, I might miss the bigger picture, like, oh, I don't know, times and dates of said event. But I think I would still answer strongly agree here because I do pick up on and remember a lot of small details that others don't. Time for the next one. I would rather go to a library than to a party. Okay, so I actually remember this question from when I've seen others do this test online. It's the only one I remembered, but the amount of overthinking it creates, because this is situation dependent. Not all libraries are completely quiet. They might have fluorescent lighting and lots of people and a small party of a few close friends where we're just sitting down playing a fun board game is actually something I would probably enjoy doing. And because us autistics tend to overthink everything, I feel like I heard somewhere that there's actually like this online guide that tells you what the intention of these questions is supposed to be. But I tried to find it online and couldn't find anything like that, so I could be totally wrong, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Anyway, if I remember correctly, the person that was talking about that guide said the intent of this question is supposed to be the stereotypical nature of a quiet library versus the stereotypical nature of a loud, chaotic party. So, if I were to answer this question with that meaning in mind, I would choose definitely agree. Next, I find making up stories easy. So, I feel like this is probably going to lower my score, but I have to answer definitely agree for this one. Because even though I have difficulty imagining what characters and scenery might look like when I'm reading a story, I can easily make up a bedtime story for my son on the fly. And dare I say, I can actually be pretty creative when I want to be. Now, with that said, I'm not great with the silly voices or exaggerated hand gestures that enrich the stories like a lot of other parents are able to do, but technically, I could absolutely make one up. So yeah, definitely agree. 15. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than to things. This one's a little bit harder for me to answer, and here's why. I would venture to say that one of my biggest special interests is autism and psychology in general, which is kind of people related. And this is actually not too uncommon for women on the spectrum. As a matter of fact, there's studies on special interests in adults that show that women reported having autism, nature, and psychology, I think, as their special interest more often than men. I'll try to find that study so I can throw the graphic up here in editing. Editing, Jen. Ugh, fine. And I'll also link to it in the description box so you can go and check that out yourself. But basically, that whole idea of autistic people being obsessed with toys and objects feels like another stereotypical trait that's probably more common in men and children. I'm not saying it's a completely useless question, but it doesn't feel very inclusive of females on the spectrum. So quite honestly, I feel like I'm struggling with this one a bit because even though my special interests are technically people related, they're not specific to a person or persons. I guess you could say it's more like a concept, right? Like psychology and autism are concepts. And in that regard, I tend to think about these concepts a lot more than I do anything else, like from the moment I wake up until the time I go to bed, which is actually frustrating in some ways. But I do care about people. Like, sure, my special interests might be all I think and talk about, but I place a higher value on the people in my life over my special interests. If someone forced me to choose between my husband and my special interest, I would choose my husband. But special interests occupy my mind 24/7.
You can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
How am I supposed to answer this if I place a higher value on human beings, but more of my mental energy goes into my special interests? I clearly can't choose agree, but I don't think I can pick definitely disagree either. So I'm just gonna choose slightly disagree. That one hurt my brain a little bit, y'all. All right, 16. I tend to have very strong interests that I get upset about if I can't pursue. This is another easy one. Definitely agree. Honestly, talking about autism in this YouTube channel is probably one of my strongest interests right now. And I tend to get frustrated at everything that gets in the way of my ability to do it. And I get agitated when interrupted after I get myself immersed in them. So, all right, next. I enjoy social chit chat. I mean, I can if it's something I want to talk about, and I can enjoy listening to other people too, but to me, chit chat would mean like superficial small talk, which I don't enjoy. So, slightly disagree. Holy crap, there are 50 questions and I am only on 17. Get it together, Jennifer. We're gonna get through this. Number 18. When I talk, it isn't always easy for others to get a word in edgewise. Depends. I would say in a lot of circumstances that's true, depending on the person and topic. Like when you combine something I'm passionate about and assuming my poor husband is the recipient, this is absolutely a true statement. But in other situations where it's people I'm not as comfortable with, I know how to be polite and let them talk. So I guess I'll say slightly agree. All right, number 19. I am fascinated by numbers. They really are trying to turn all of us into Rain Man, aren't they? I feel like this is similar to the license plate question, so I'll just choose definitely disagree. All right, number 20. When I'm reading a story, I find it difficult to work out the character's intentions. I think I'd actually choose definitely disagree with this. And again, this is one of the outliers of being able to better understand social cues like I mentioned earlier. I feel like I'm pretty good at understanding the intent of other people, or at least I think I am. I mean, I'll admit, I do tend to give almost everyone the benefit of the doubt, which can maybe keep me from seeing bad intentions sometimes, but other than that, whether it's in real life or reading about characters in a book, I'd like to think I do a pretty good job of understanding other people's intentions. Think I do. All right, 21. I don't particularly enjoy reading fiction. I'm gonna slightly agree here because I don't hate reading fiction, but I absolutely much more prefer biographies and documentaries based on true events if I had to choose between the two. I just find documentaries a lot more enjoyable. All right, I find it hard to make new friends. 100% strongly agree with this. No hesitation in selecting. Definitely agree. This statement right here reminds me of a meme I once saw called How Introverts Make Friends, and it basically said something along the lines of an extrovert finds them and adopts them. And this is very true to me. I really only make friends if people choose to adopt me, and then it takes me a year or two before I begin to really let them in and feel close to them. Unfortunately, most of the friendships I've had have fizzled out because I just don't do a good job of keeping up with them and reaching out and checking in and all that stuff. So basically, it definitely takes someone special to be my friend. Only the strong survive. All right, 23. I notice patterns and things all the time. I talked about this in the license plate question. I do notice patterns everywhere I go, like I said. I tend to look down when I'm walking places, and I absolutely notice patterns in flooring or on cloth benches or on metalwork, etc. And honestly, I'll focus on patterns and shapes way more than I do faces. And a lot of times it actually helps me to focus and pay attention when I'm talking or listening to other people. So I would answer definitely agree to this one. Number 24. I would rather go to the theater rather than a museum. See what happened here? The person that came up with this question had to be the same guy that came up with the library question. And they were like, hey, what if we did this same question, but we just swapped library and party for museums and theaters? And everyone was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And like the library question, it depends, damn it. I'd probably prefer going to the movie theater if it's a movie I actually want to see, and I don't have to talk to anyone while I'm watching it, versus going to a museum with someone and having to make small talk while we looked at exhibits under fluorescent lighting for several hours. No, thank you. Not having to socialize because you're watching a movie is pretty appealing, actually. But I'm assuming the spirit of this question is supposed to be that social, loud event of a theater as opposed to a quiet museum. So, knowing that I would prefer a quieter environment with less people, assuming that is indeed the intent of this question, I would choose definitely disagree. All right. Number 25. It does not upset me if my daily routine is disturbed. Where's the extra strongly disagree button? Strongly disagree. Yeah, I absolutely get upset when my routine is disturbed. Now, as I've mentioned before, my ADHD does allow for spontaneity, but it has to be planned spontaneity in some ways. Like, I have to have a window of time or certain days where I'm open to it. All right, number 26. I frequently find that I don't know how to keep conversation going. Funny that they should ask this, because in my last video, I literally talked about how I struggle coming up with conversation topics sometimes. But I can keep a conversation going. A lot of times I just throw all the things I have at it, then I hit a dead end with nowhere to go. So I guess I'll choose slightly agree. Find it easy to read between the lines when someone is talking to me. Again, social cues. Don't struggle with this, even though I know there are a lot of people on the spectrum that do. So I would choose definitely agree here, which is inevitably going to impact my score, and that's fine. I'm not doing this to manipulate the system. Matter of fact, if I don't score high enough on this test, it might just show that we need other tests that include ADHD, since we know there is such a high instance of these two conditions co-occurring. 28. I usually concentrate more on the whole picture rather than on the small details. Definitely disagree. Disagree. I told you guys, I didn't read ahead, and I keep accidentally answering questions that pop up in other questions. I already discussed this in the question relating to noticing details that others do not, so this is working out kind of nicely for me. 29. I'm not very good at remembering phone numbers. Definitely agree. And to be honest, I feel like this might be highly impacted by also having ADHD. A lot of information just kind of slides right out of my brain after hearing it, which sucks. So, no, I'm not good at remembering stuff like this. Whereas people with just autism alone might be much better at retaining information like remembering phone numbers. But also, we have cell phones now. Who the heck is still memorizing phone numbers? Number 30. I don't usually notice small changes in a situation or a person's appearance. This one's going to be really hard for me to answer because I don't usually notice small changes with people's appearance because I struggle with eye contact and propophanesia, and I don't always notice small changes in a situation because I also spend a lot of time in my own head or looking at the ground. But if it's something I care about, like the placement of things in my home, then I definitely notice, to the point where I notice when something is a few inches off from where it's supposed to be, or if something gets even a tiny scratch or dent that wasn't there before. And that's not an exaggeration. Like if someone wanted to break into my home and not steal anything but just marginally annoy the heck out of me, all they would have to do would be to break in and slightly move a bunch of things around. So it's like 50-50 in a way. I either notice and see nothing, or I notice and see everything, depending on what it is. I guess I'll just answer slightly agree to this one. All right, 31. I know how to tell if someone is listening to me or getting bored. Yes, I do. Another social cues question. I told you guys there were going to be a lot of social cues questions. Definitely agree. Number 32. I find it easy to do more than one thing at a time. I think I slightly agree with this one, and that might be an ADHD thing, but it feels like my brain and my body are both trying to do more than one thing at a time all the time. Now I feel the most at peace when I can focus on just one thing at a time, so I wouldn't say I enjoy doing more than one thing at once necessarily, but I do often do it. All right. When I talk on the phone, I'm not sure when it's my turn to speak. I think I'll choose definitely disagree to this question specifically, but I do still have phone awkwardness. Like, just today, I accidentally hung up on someone while they were still talking because I thought we were done talking. And sometimes I wait too long to talk, even though I know it's my turn, and then we're both talking at once. All those butt clenching phone discomforts we all experience. So, if I were to answer based on other phone dialogue faux pas, I might actually answer definitely agree to this. But if I'm just answering this specific scenario exactly, I would have to go with disagree because I do at least know when it's my turn to talk. All right. I enjoy doing things spontaneously. I do actually, but like I said, I have to have the mindset and windows of time that I'm open to it. But yes, the novelty seeking side of ADHD can be very spontaneous. And to a lot of people, I'm sure planned spontaneity sounds like a dichotomous phrase where the two words cancel each other out, but they're not. I could take a trip out of town to a new place in my state that I've never visited and spin a wheel to see which new restaurant we're going to try. Many people with just autism alone would feel very dysregulated by doing something like that. Like they probably couldn't handle it. But for me, only when it's not unplanned or imposing in a way that interrupts my precious routine. Precious! So I will choose slightly agree. Where are we? Question 35. All right, we are chugging along. Okay, I am often the last to understand the point of a joke. I think I do a good job of understanding jokes, so I'll select definitely disagree. I admit I don't get jokes and sarcasm 100% of the time, but most of the time I feel like I do. Like, who does get jokes and sarcasm 100% of the time? Okay, I find it easy to work out what someone is thinking or feeling just by looking at their face. Here's the thing. I don't do the best job of looking at people's faces, and I struggle with propophonasia, which means I can't always recognize familiar people by their faces because I'm not looking at them. But if I were to take one of those stupid online questionnaires where you try to guess the emotions of people based on pictures of their expressions, I feel like I might do okay at it. So, just because I don't look at people's faces enough to notice what their expressions are, I think I would probably get what they were feeling based on their facial expressions if I were looking at them. But I probably only select slightly agree here. All right, 37. If there's an interruption, I can switch back to what I was doing very quickly. Nope. Strongly disagree. My mind needs a lot of time to adjust to a new situation or activity. I need time to mentally prepare myself to get out of the car, to walk into a building. So I don't really feel like this one requires a ton of elaboration. That's a pretty easy answer for me. Okay. I am good at social chit chat. First, it's do I enjoy social chit chat? Now it's am I any good at it? I'm gonna say slightly disagree again. I can be good at it when I try really hard, but it's a lot of masking and it's draining. And I have issues with scripting or being awkward. So it's not consistent. And the high masking means I'm not doing it naturally. So I think slightly disagree would be the best fit there. All right, number 39. People often tell me that I keep going on about the same thing. Yes. No, people don't tell me I do it because they're trying to be polite, but I know I do it. And here's why. First is because I often feel misunderstood, so I tend to talk a subject to death because I feel like I need to really drive the point home or like I've properly addressed each point or said it in a way that people are going to understand. And when it comes to special interests, I'll talk about those things at length because I enjoy them and it's how I bond. So I would choose definitely agree here. Number 40. When I was young, I used to enjoy playing games that involve pretend with other children. Feel like I'm struggling between slightly agreeing and slightly disagreeing here. I remember playing Office or House and stuff like that when I was really young, but I had more memories of being more into setting up the scenery or making clothes and props for my toys or staring at magazines of accessories I could buy for my toys rather than actually playing imaginatively with the toys themselves. I actually have a picture of me arranging all my troll doll collection in a line, but I never really played with them. So I did technically do it. I can't say I never did it, but not to the extent that maybe other children did. So I guess maybe I should select slightly disagree. Okay. I like to collect information about categories of things, e.g., types of cars, birds, trains, plants. I do not. Not a ton of wish-washy overthinking on this one, thank goodness. I just don't. I mean, I suppose you could say I enjoy learning categorical information about things pertaining to autism and ADHD, and I feel like I also think in a categorical manner where everything is bunched into its own category or chapter, if you will, but I don't collect information or objects relating to categories of things. So I think I'm going to answer definitely disagree to this one. All right. I find it difficult to imagine what it would be like to be someone else. I actually don't. I wonder if this is a question related to theory of mind, which means being able to understand another person's beliefs and emotions and intentions and stuff like that, which is closely related to empathy. And I believe there's been at least one study that has debunked the notion that autistic people lack theory of mind. So honestly, not even sure this question should be on here, but I don't know. Again, this will probably lower my overall autism score, but I'm going to go ahead and choose definitely disagree here. I will find that study that challenges the theory of mind issue and include that in the description box of this video before I publish it. All right, number 43. I like to carefully plan any activities I participate in. I think I'm going to answer slightly agree to this, and here's why. I really enjoy knowing what to expect for activities and vacation and stuff like that, but my ADHD jumps in and A, makes it hard for me to sit down and plan activities, and B, since I am open to spontaneity, I don't get overly upset or have meltdowns if I don't have an exact plan for every activity. Number 44, I enjoy social occasions. At this point, it's probably a good thing I didn't suggest we play a drinking game of taking a shot every time I said the phrase "it depends," because it depends. I can actually enjoy structured social activities. Again, this is because I can focus on the activity and not solely on the socialization while still getting to be around people at the same time. But I'd probably rather eat a box of bees than have an unstructured social activity, especially amongst professionals where the socialization is the purpose and the goal. So I'm going to say slightly disagree if we're looking at the socialization goal aspect. I find it difficult to work out people's intentions. Again, even though I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, I don't feel like I have issues realizing people's intentions. So I'm going to answer definitely disagree here. New situations make me anxious. I mean, yes, they can, but I also have more flexibility due to also having ADHD, so I think I'll answer slightly disagree. Only 4 more to go, people. I enjoy meeting new people. I mean, I'm not averse to it or hate it, but I don't seek it out. And it can be stressful meeting new people. Nothing about them. I may not know what to talk about and all that jazz. But on the other hand, it can be kind of nice sometimes because it's like a clean slate. They don't know a thing about you. And you might actually have some more stuff to talk about that they've never heard before because you know nothing about each other. So I think I'll select slightly disagree. I'm a good diplomat. Seems like another social skills question. I think it wants to know how good you are with people and being a diplomat, which requires a lot of people skills. Let me see how Google defines being diplomatic. So it says it means to be good at communication and intercultural skills
and being able to bring people together of various religions and political and cultural backgrounds, as well as leadership skills and communication skills.
Nunchuck skills, bow hunting skills.
here it describes it like being able to control a different situation without upsetting anyone. So, on that second way it's described, I would say I'm pretty conflict avoidant, which is true for a lot of us, which unfortunately leads to fawning and failing to set boundaries for ourselves sometimes. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a very strong opinion on things and would be willing to go scorched earth on a lot of them, but I am conflict averse at the same time, and this often shows up in me trying to quell or soften arguments between two people. But that first way it's described, I feel like I'm probably not the greatest at communicating effectively, and I certainly wouldn't say I have leadership skills.
Computer hacking skills.
But I can negotiate and feel like I'm very empathetic to different cultures and beliefs. So I think I'll do slightly agree. Okay. 49. I am not very good at remembering people's dates of birth. Definitely agree. Pretty much already answered that one in another question. This might be an unfortunate trait more related to ADHD, but I don't know. All right. Last question, you guys. If you've made it this far with me, you rock. All right. I find it very easy to play games with children that involve pretending. Nope. I do not. And I'm not mean to kids because there are a ton of activities you can do with them that don't involve imagination. And it's funny because I feel like as autistics, we often talk about how we feel like we're immature compared to our peers, while also being old souls at the same time. So even though I do feel less mature than my peers, that doesn't mean I enjoy doing stuff like this or can do stuff like this. And in some ways it makes me feel bad. Like, I don't know, I'm the aging version of Wendy from Peter Pan that forgets how to play pretend. But like I said, I can do activities with them. I don't mind rough housing. I could set up elaborate play areas for them, and I could draw with them on the sidewalk with sidewalk chalk or blow bubbles with them. But if you ask me to take out a doll or an action figure and role play, nope, not gonna happen. So this is definitely disagree for me. All right, so let's see how much of the tism I have. $29. All right. So it looks like I still have the tism, and I don't know if that's a bragging right or not, but there you have it. Now again, the threshold was 26, so I did score a little bit on the lower end, but I do feel like I kind of answered a lot of those questions conservatively, so it could actually be higher, but I think this does go to show you that also having ADHD might impact your score on something like this. So my point in all of this is that if you suspect you might have both, tests like this might only be capturing half the picture. And that doesn't mean that tests like this are completely useless, but it's just something to keep in mind. And that if you feel imposter syndrome because you don't completely relate to just autism or just ADHD alone, that you're not crazy. Having both really does present in a unique way that can be a little bit confusing at times. And I hope I showed that in taking this online test with you guys. So that's it. It would mean a lot if you would hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. All right, until next time, bye for now. Mwah. A lot of information just kind of slides right out of my brain after hearing it.